Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Reboot Recovery Show. I'm Evan, so excited that you're here. Today we're going to be talking about an issue that any of us who have gone through trauma have had to deal with, which is how do we rebuild trust? Trust in others, trust in God, but also let's be honest, sometimes trauma causes us to even lose trust in ourselves. Bryan Flanery from the Reboot team is here to talk about this today. You're not going to want to miss it. Stick around. All right, well, it's that time again for the Reboot Recovery Show. As you just heard, we are talking about trust today. Again, if you have things you ever want us to talk about in the show, please send them in, info@rebootrecovery.com. You can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, MySpace, classmates.com. I'm just teasing. We're not on either of those old ones. But the point is, you can find us if you want to. Please, if there's a topic that you say, hey, this is kind of where I'm at in my trauma journey, could you speak about whatever the topic is? Remember, this is the topic where you choose, or this is the show where you choose the topic, and then we talk about it. And one of the things that we've heard a lot over the years is this issue of trust. We hear it so often. People say, before trauma, I was a person who trusted, who thought the best in people, who felt, optimistic about my relationships. And now following trauma, not so much anymore. And I think what they struggle with sometimes is how do I begin rebuilding that trust? And, Bryan and I, we've been on this Reboot reunion tour, hitting up cities around the country where we're bringing leaders and graduates together. And one of the topics that he decided he wanted to speak on during the reunion tour was this issue of trust. And I thought it's been so good and it's hit home every single time that we've done a stop that I thought we need to do a extended podcast episode just on that subject. So, Bryan, thanks for being here today. Let's dig in to the subject of trust. You start off with a story when you speak that I think is so timely because this episode's being recorded right around Halloween time.
Sure.
So tell us that story, because every time I hear it, I'm like, man, that's such a great point.
Yeah, so I remember being, a little kid. I was probably between 5 and 7, and like most of us, on Halloween, I was excited about one thing and one thing only, candy. But my parents wouldn't let me go by myself, and so I had to go with my sister. But she had got ready with her friends early, and they had gone, so I got stuck passing out candy. And then my sister comes back, and I was like, hey, can I go trick-or-treating with them? And my mom and dad were like, yeah, just go. So I go out with my sister, and I am so happy, right? I'm running up the houses, trick-or-treat. They're throwing candy in. I'm yelling, thank you, running to the next house. And my sister and her friends are staying with me, and it's awesome. But then we get up to this house, right? And I'll never forget this house. There was a little fire going, and there was 4 garden chairs, like the old white ones that you can't find anymore, but they never broke.
Yeah.
They were sitting around it, and there were these like trash bag people, but it was like they had raked up leaves, thrown in the trash bag, and made people out of it. And my sister and her friend were laughing, and they were like, hey, Bri, you go ahead and do this house by yourself. Just go ahead. And I'm like, okay, cool. And at this point, like, I trusted my sister, I trusted her friend, so I run up there, so happy, and there was a bowl that said, take one, and so I took one, and I put it in my bag, and as I go to turn around, all 4 of these wow bags came to life. Like, they just popped up and roar. One person was like, I don't know what he said, but all I know is I was never a fast runner, but that night, I was Forrest Gump. I was running.
Hand speed record.
Man, and of course I was a kid and I wasn't the smartest, so I went the wrong way. Then I got lost. Finally, a neighbor finds me, helps me get home. And when I got home, I dumped out my candy and I was sorting my candy. And I'll never forget going to my room, sitting in my room, and thinking to myself, I don't trust my sister. Right? And so it was this weird moment I had, even at a young age, where I realized, like, blindly trusting people will lead to me getting hurt.
Yeah. It really speaks to how fragile trust is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you say something when you speak about that it takes years to build, but only moments to destroy.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about trust, there's only a few ways that trust is actually earned, right? And even from a young age, we're all told trust is earned, it's not given, this, that, and the other. Well, if you think about trust, really, somebody earns trust from years of doing what they say they're going to do
Right.
and being deemed trustworthy to
Right.
you.
Right.
The other way is somebody you trust transfers that trust to somebody else.
That's right.
Right? So, for example, if my lead pastor gets up and he says, hey, this is John Smith, we trust him, then instantly I trust John without knowing him because my pastor. It's the same thing with parents. A lot of times with authoritative figures, we start to trust blindly because somebody else that we trust them.
Because it's transferable.
That's right. And it takes forever for trust to be earned, but in that way it's really quick. But the problem is one moment, all the trust that you've had can be destroyed.
Yeah, and it's interesting too that it's transferable because, so for example, I trust this person, but then if the person that I trusted who introduced me to this new person, if I break trust with that person, then everybody who in that circle,
that's right,
I start to distrust, not just the person. And I would wonder, just in the way that trust is contagious and transferable, is distrust.
Absolutely, and it is because, think about it. If you have a negative experience with a police officer, your trust of law enforcement
so good
gets changed.
Right.
That's the same thing with the military, a doctor, a dentist, right? It's like one person in an occupation or a role. If I go to a restaurant and I have a really terrible experience, I don't go to that restaurant again. And if I'm traveling and I see another one, I don't want to go there either because I don't trust that my experience is going to be well.
That's right. I think the whole chain that we see this in the VA, right? You had one bad appointment with somebody, the whole VA, and even Reboot has been the victim, I'd say, of this contagiousness or this transferable distrust. They might have a bad experience where maybe we were off one day on a Saturday and they text us a message on Saturday and they needed something and we didn't get back until Monday, but by Sunday night they're angry and they've written us off and sometimes they'll kind of throw the whole organization out.
Right.
And it's interesting because sometimes it's those micro things. Somebody said the house was safe to go to, you went to it, had a bad experience.
Right.
I think about let's talk. So before we get into trauma, let's just talk about some of those micro kind of things that happen. Someone says, "Hey, my church is a safe place." They go, and all of a sudden that week, somebody asks them something or says something to them that wasn't. So now the outcome of that is, you told me this was trustworthy. It turned out not to be, and now I don't trust you anymore.
That's right, and that's with organizations, churches, and there's this interesting concept, right, that we have to think about. Every situation in life, you have two options, right? You have an opportunity to trust or to allow suspicion into the gap. Those are the two. For example, if my wife, I have 4 kids, love them. My wife spends way more time with them and taking care of them than I do because I'm working, I'm traveling, all this stuff. If I come home and my wife says, "Hey, I need a girls' night. I'm going to go to dinner with the girls. I'm going to leave at 7. I'll be back around 10:30. Right. 11 o'clock comes around. My wife's not home. I have 2 options, right? I can put suspicion in the gap or I can put trust in the gap. Suspicion looks like, oh man, she's out doing things she's not supposed to be doing with people she's not supposed to be with. She's doing this, she's doing that. Or I can put trust in the gap where I know my wife. I know her character. Right? And I know that this is probably the first meal she's had in 6 months without mom. Right. And she's probably just lost track of time. And the crazy thing is my decision affects not only that night, but our future. Because if she comes in the door and I'm suspicious and I'm like, where were you? What were you doing? She's instantly defensive. Right? And it essentially leads to World War III in your household between the two of you.
Right.
Now, the crazy thing is when she comes in, even if it's midnight, and she comes in and I had put trust in the gap and I'm like, "Hey, how was your night?" And she's like, "Good." You can already tell that she feels guilty. She feels bad. Right? And so when she comes in, though, and sees that I've put trust in the gap, it just builds to even more trust in our relationship.
And it makes the whole experience better.
That's right.
Because she doesn't have now that saddle with that guilt or that regret or whatever.
That's right. And she doesn't feel guilty about asking again.
Yeah. And I think that in the work that we do with trauma, I don't think there's been more than 5% of people, maybe less, who come to a Reboot Recovery course trusting the local leader of that course.
Fair.
Right? I mean, they come into our program, and some of you who are listening or watching this were those people, and that's okay. But they come in thinking, this isn't going to work. This person doesn't have a clue what I've been through and can't possibly understand. And I'm doing this just because somebody told me I should, and they dragged me here or whatnot, right? And so that's sort of what they're coming into it. So they're entering in where I feel like as a leader, a lot of times of a Reboot course, it's not like I'm starting at like, let's try this new restaurant. Let's see if we like it or not.
Right.
I'm not starting at that. I'm starting at like, this is going to be an awful experience. And so I spend the first 6 to 8 weeks just getting back to like 0.
Sure.
And then it's weeks 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 that I finally feel like I'm positive yardage. I'm kind of positive moving the trust needle there. And so with trauma, it definitely has profound impact in the way that we view trust. Because for some of us, we stopped trusting people at a very young age. There was that uncle, that cousin, that friend that we thought was a good person, that mom and dad trusted, that everybody at the church liked. And then one night, that person invaded our space and everything changed. For others of us, it's been the slow decline over time of trust. Every time we trust dad. Dad tells us this is going to happen. Well, he has to reschedule. Okay, fine. We'll trust dad again. Well, he stood us up. Okay, this time we're going to trust dad again. And over time, it's just like it chips away at trust.
Yeah.
So pretty soon we start to become this callous person, this person who's unable to trust.
Sure, and even from a young age, the way we trust as an adult is impacted. For example, like many other people, I didn't have the best relationship with my dad at a young age. And some of the things that he did, said, and whatnot, it affected the way that I trusted him. But what I didn't realize till much later in life, the way that I didn't trust my dad caused me to not trust authority in general.
Right.
So when I joined the military, I was mistrusting of my leadership based off what had happened with my father. The same thing with other people around me. When there was an authoritative figure around me, I had trouble just trusting them based off of previous experience.
Right. No, I think that's totally good. And I think you bring up one of the ways that trust can start being restored is to recognize if trust and distrust are both transferable onto other people, is to say to yourself, hey, before I go into this relationship, am I giving it the benefit of the doubt? Am I giving it trust as the default to start? Or am I allowing my distrust, my past woundedness, my past woundings to be imprinted on this new relationship and this new opportunity? Because when we carry over that distrust into every new relationship, we kind of we
sabotage.
Exactly. We doom it to failure before it even has a chance to start. And we see this so many times. We even see it in relationships. Somebody comes out of a divorce, they don't really heal, and after that they go through a series of just broken relationships.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, like when it comes to trust, like the other part of trust is like you can't walk through life blindly trusting everything and everyone.
Right.
Because when you're blindly trusting, you miss red flags. You miss opportunities to protect yourself or other people.
Right.
And so like there's this, when it comes to trust, especially after trauma, there's like this, cat rope. Nope, that's not the
tightrope.
Tightrope. That's
I don't
what
know
I was
what a cat rope is. Cat rope.
Whatever. Yeah. There's this tightrope act that you have to do where you're wanting to trust people, you're wanting to trust yourself. For me, the hardest for a long time was trusting God. But as I started to be able to do that, but then I started blindly trusting everybody. Right. Which left me vulnerable and got me hurt quite a few times.
Or taken advantage of.
That's right. And so you have to trust, but when it comes to trust, like trusting people, for a lot of people, trusting people is easy. Trusting God is really hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you do blindly trust people, that will lead to catastrophic situations, right? No, I mean that'd be a total catastrophe. No, I think though that's a good point when we do blindly trust, because I do want to say this to people who have dealt with trauma. People who are abusers or who are manipulative, they seek out personalities that have dealt with trauma before that are vulnerable. And so they do look for that, and they say, hey, this person has a trust issue. Let me get in their good graces. And it's like every time I'm with a friend who's kind of in a new relationship, I'm always like, everybody's perfect for 3 months. Everybody's perfect for 3 months.
Yeah.
Wait till month 6 to find out if this person's really trustworthy. Because for 3 months, anybody can put on a good, smile and act and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's one of the challenges of the Reboot course. Yeah. You know what? Anybody's perfect for 12 weeks, which is 3 months. They're going to say the right things. They're going to smile. They're going to talk about all this healing. And I used to be really impressed, and I would put tons of authority and trust in these graduates' hands. They were on fire for God, and they were healing. And I'd say, you're going to be a leader. Let me put all this faith and trust in you. And I used to get excited, but now I don't get excited anymore by mountain peaks. I get excited by consistency over a long period of time. I'm not looking for sprinters. I'm looking for marathon runners. And so I think, okay, so the first thing is, how do we start rebuilding trust? Is we say, hey, are we starting with a fair slate here, a clean slate, if you will, or at least an informed slate? Not that we're going in blindly just trusting, right? But also not that we're leading with suspicion, right? So that's step one. Step two then is this situation, this organization, this person proving themselves over a period of time. We want to give trust, but we want to dole it out like paychecks, a little at a time. Right? We don't want to give them all that up front because they're going to misuse it. So that's the second thing. So, Bryan, what's some other things that we can do when it comes to how do we start reestablishing trust?
Yeah, I think one of the number 3, an important part of it would be boundaries, right? Like, because especially after you've been hurt, after you've experienced trauma, most of the time boundaries go out the window. Like, because now you want to please people. Now you want, you don't want to be vulnerable. You don't want people to see the hurt you. And I think one of the most important, especially with trust, is setting up boundaries and then sticking to those boundaries. And not allowing those to move back and forth. And at the same time, like, most of your trust will come from experience, right? Your experience. So if once you've been hurt, it can force you to think that every experience you've ever had is bad. Like when it came to me and trusting God specifically, I missed all the good moments. I missed all the good things, all the great things, all the positive things. And the only things that replayed in my mind night after night are all the painful moments, all the times that I'd experienced different things in my life. And so what that led me to this belief that no, I couldn't trust God because God hadn't proven to be trustworthy.
Yeah.
And it was actually you in a roundabout way who helped me see, like, I looked back on my life and I saw all these amazing moments that had happened, and I saw all these painful moments, but I also saw all these times that it doesn't make sense that I'm here. Right. It doesn't make sense that I survived. It doesn't make sense that these things worked out the way that they did. And that's what helped me to see that, wow, I didn't survive just because of good looks or strapping, heroism. Right. I survived because of God, and it changed my belief of the experiences that I've been through.
Right.
And when that changed, I was finally able to look at my life experience with God, and I was able to look back and go, man, you really have been good. You've been there. You really have, like, everything I've read about you is true, and I trust you. And I think for many people, one of the problems is they look back at their life and they're so focused on the negative, or they don't believe that they've had that good experience with God.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's in my life, at least, I feel like anytime I start to feel isolated, it's usually the first symptom of actually where I'm distrusting. I'm distrusting God because I've pulled away from him. I'm distrusting others because I've pulled away from them. And I've only put my trust in myself. And that's often what a person who's gone through adverse childhood experiences, they've gone through trauma. There's usually only one person they trust, which is themselves. And then sometimes after a series of bad decisions in relationships or a series of bad choices, then they don't even trust that person anymore. And if you're finding yourself today listening to this or watching this and saying, you know what, my world has gotten continually smaller. I used to trust God. I don't feel like I trust him. And I used to trust other people. I don't. And I'm not sure I trust myself anymore. I want you to hear me. That's a natural end to trauma-based distrust if we continue to just lead with distrust all the time. And that's why when we talk about in the Reboot curriculum finding safety and stability, one of the reasons safety is so important is because it's a place where you can trust other people.
That's right.
And that's why we push our courses. That's why that's so important. And I think even in Brian's story, I can even say from the first time I met you, you didn't trust me. You didn't trust anyone in the group, right? And over time, as he began to trust other people, something miraculous happened. He became trusted by other people. You see, so like as he began to trust in others and in God, all of a sudden he became stable enough that other people started placing their trust in him. And that's how I start to view, really, that's when I look at who's ready to lead a reboot course. That's what I look for, is a person who's learned to trust God enough. They've learned to trust themselves, and they've learned to trust others enough that they've got some good stability, and now other people are coming to them for trusting. There was a young man, 27 years old. I managed him for many years at my previous company for about 8 years, and he all the time would come to me and say, Evan, I'm ready to lead. I'm a leader. Put me in charge. Make me a manager. I'm a leader. And finally, one day after him asking me this again, because it always came with, I want to raise and I want to lead people, and if I can't get that, I'm going to leave this company. Right? That's what it always. He was a very talented young man. And I said to him one day, I said, Bud, I said, let me just say it to you like this. I said, leaders aren't leaders because they get the titles or because they get the pay. They're leaders because they're already leading. So let me ask you this right now. Who is currently following you? And he goes, well, what do you mean? And I was like, you see, a leader is somebody who people are already following. And so what I would advise you to do if you're distrusting is go to some people who you think are trustworthy. Maybe you don't fully trust them, but you think maybe they're trustworthy. And just say, who are you following? And then kind of walk alongside of them for a period of time.
Sure.
And then lean from there. And all of us will let people down, but I think it has to start with those baby steps. It has to start with setting good boundaries, finding people who doling out that trust slowly over time, right? It begins by offering a clean initial first slate to people, right? And it ends by becoming a person that is trustworthy.
Absolutely.
That's the ultimate goal of your rebuilding your trust muscles, from trauma. It's not easy, is it?
No, but just like everything else we always talk about, it may not be easy, but it's worth it.
Right. It's worth it. That's right. And so, again, if you're watching this, hopefully this episode spoke to you today. If you've not had a chance to check out any of the stuff we've been doing on previous episodes, go back and watch that. Remember I think you're supposed to like and subscribe to the podcast, or if you're on YouTube, you can hit that little alert bell, or you can press the thumbs up. Again, submit questions to us, share this out with your friends. We want this to be a resource for you and people that you love as well. So again, this is Evan Owens with the Reboot Recovery Show. Super glad to have you here, Brian as well. And that is it for today's episode. Let's keep moving forward as we overcome trauma together.
Together.